Imogen living in a neighborhood that looks picture perfect on the outside, but behind those manicured lawns and freshly painted fences, secrets, grudges, and hidden battles are growing every day. The suburban streets of Willow Creek had always looked like something out of a glossy magazine. Every mailbox stood at the same height, every lawn trimmed within an inch of perfection, and every driveway polished like glass. It was the kind of place where people waved politely, but whispered when the garage doors shut. For Marcus, however, this neighborhood wasn't just a place to live. It was the symbol of everything he had worked for. After years of dedication and sacrifice, he had finally bought the home of his dreams. Marcus was a man who believed in hard work and quiet dignity. His weekends were often spent planting flowers in the front yard, repainting his porch, or greeting neighbors with a calm smile. But not everyone appreciated his presence. Across the street lived Karen, the self-appointed voice of the HOA. She had lived in Willow Creek for years, and many joked that she acted like the neighborhood's queen. For Karen, every little detail was a battle: the color of a mailbox, the length of a hedge, the position of a trash bin. At first, Marcus brushed it off as harmless pettiness. When she slipped a warning letter under his door about the shade of blue on his shutters, he simply laughed and ignored it. When she made remarks about his garden not matching the neighborhood aesthetic, he kept his calm. But Marcus soon realized this wasn't just nitpicking, it was a pattern. Karen had a reputation for bullying newcomers, and she seemed to have set her sights on him. The tension grew silently, like storm clouds on the horizon. Karen filed complaint after complaint with the HOA board, always phrased in cold, formal language. She questioned his paint colors, his fence design, even the type of car he parked in his driveway. Neighbors began to notice, some whispering to Marcus that he wasn't the first she had targeted. Still, Marcus believed in patience. He documented everything, saving letters, taking pictures, and logging dates. But behind her constant complaints, Karen's frustration was turning into something more dangerous. For every polite smile Marcus offered, Karen seemed to grow more determined to make his life miserable. What started as warnings about flowers and fences was slowly shifting into acts no homeowner should ever endure. Marcus didn't know it yet, but the battle between dignity and control was just beginning, and the perfect streets of Willow Creek were about to reveal their darkest cracks. The weeks that followed only deepened the unease in Marcus's mind. He had expected Karen's complaints to taper off, but instead, they grew bolder and strangely personal. At first, it was paperwork, emails, warning slips, and HOA violation notices. Then, the problems began creeping into his daily life. One morning, Marcus walked out to retrieve his newspaper and stopped short. His mailbox, freshly installed and painted only a month ago, was leaning sideways, its wooden post cracked at the base. He frowned, crouching to inspect it. The break was clean, almost deliberate. He brushed it off, telling himself accidents happen, and quickly replaced it. Yet only 3 nights later, the new mailbox was gone entirely. Marcus started noticing other odd things. His garden beds, once blooming with bright tulips and daffodils, looked as if someone had deliberately yanked the flowers out by their roots. Lawn ornaments vanished, his welcome mat went missing, and twice he found trash dumped across his yard. To the average eye, these were small annoyances, but Marcus knew better. These were warnings. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones when he passed by. Some gave sympathetic glances, but none wanted to get directly involved. "That's just Karen," one older resident finally admitted. "She's been like this for years. Most people just give in. Easier that way." But Marcus wasn't the type to bow down to intimidation. Instead, he quietly began to keep records. He saved every complaint letter Karen pushed through his door. He set up a small camera near his front porch, hoping to catch the person behind the vandalism. He even kept a handwritten log of dates, times, and unusual events. Still, no amount of preparation could ease the frustration that came with seeing his dream home constantly under attack. One evening, while raking leaves, Marcus caught sight of Karen standing on her porch across the street, arms folded, staring directly at him. She didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't even try to hide her glare. For the first time, Marcus felt the weight of something more sinister than petty HOA disputes. The tension in Willow Creek was no longer silent. It was visible, pressing down on every exchange, every glance, every unwritten rule. The sabotage around Marcus's home wasn't just about flowers or fences anymore. It was about control. And though he remained calm on the surface, inside, Marcus knew a line was being crossed. He could sense it in the way neighbors avoided eye contact, in the chill that hung between him and Karen. Something was building, slowly and dangerously, and it wouldn't be long before it erupted in a way no one could ignore. The unease had been simmering for weeks, but Marcus never expected it to escalate the way it did. One chilly evening, after a long day at work, he pulled into his driveway just as the sun dipped below the horizon. At first, everything looked normal. The porch light clicked on automatically, and his house stood quietly at the end of the street. But as Marcus stepped out of his car, a faint, acrid smell in the air made him pause. He walked toward his backyard, following the scent, and froze. His garden shed, the one he had spent months restoring to store his tools, was nothing but a blackened frame. The wooden panels were charred, the roof sagging inward, and the ground beneath it was littered with ashes. Even worse, a section of his back porch bore scorch marks, dark streaks crawling up the wood as if the flames had tried to climb higher before dying out. Panic surged through Marcus as he hurried to inspect the house itself. Miraculously, the fire hadn't spread. The damage was contained, but the thought of what could have happened left his chest heavy. His home, his dream, had come dangerously close to destruction. He immediately called the fire department and local police. Within the hour, red and blue lights painted his quiet street. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering and shaking their heads. Some expressed concern, while others avoided his gaze entirely. Marcus stood silently, his arms folded, as officers examined the damage. When questioned, Marcus told them everything about the complaints, the missing items, the vandalism. He showed them his growing stack of letters and violation slips, each signed or linked back to Karen. He even handed over footage from his porch camera, which, although grainy, showed a shadowy figure moving near his yard just nights before. The fire marshal confirmed that the blaze appeared intentional. Traces of accelerant were found near the shed, suggesting someone had tried to start a fire but failed to make it spread. The officers took notes carefully, promising an investigation. Karen, meanwhile, watched from her porch, wrapped in a cardigan as if she were just another curious neighbor. Her expression was unreadable, almost smug. She didn't approach, didn't ask if Marcus was all right, and didn't acknowledge the chaos unraveling only yards away. While the flashing lights eventually faded and the crowd dispersed, Marcus stood alone in his yard, staring at the scorched remains. His heart was heavy, but his resolve was stronger than ever. Whoever had tried to break him didn't realize one thing. Marcus wasn't a man who gave up. He was a man who prepared. The battle in Willow Creek had crossed a line, and now it was no longer just about HOA rules. It was about justice. The morning after the fire, Marcus woke to a street buzzing with speculation. Neighbors who once waved politely now lingered at their fences, whispering behind cupped hands. Though many looked sympathetic, few dared approach him directly. In Willow Creek, siding against the HOA was almost unthinkable, and Karen had been its loudest voice for years. The police returned later that day, canvassing the neighborhood for information. An officer knocked on doors, asking if anyone had seen unusual activity the night before. At first, the answers were hesitant, shrugs, polite denials, vague comments about hearing noises. But slowly, cracks in the silence began to show. One neighbor admitted she had seen Karen walking near Marcus's property late at night with what looked like a flashlight. Another revealed a string of emails from Karen that threatened serious consequences if Marcus did not repaint his shutters and replace his garden fence. A third neighbor recalled Karen angrily ranting at a community meeting, declaring that Marcus's house didn't belong in Willow Creek. Each statement added weight to Marcus's suspicions. He carefully handed the police his folder of evidence: the warning letters, the photos of vandalism, the notes from his surveillance camera. The officer flipped through the pages, eyebrows narrowing with each new detail. Karen, of course, denied everything. When approached by investigators, she feigned innocence, claiming she was being unfairly targeted. She spoke loudly about her duty to uphold community standards and accused Marcus of exaggerating sharing his troubles. To those who didn't know her history, she might have sounded convincing. But to Marcus, it was another mask, one she had worn too long. The tension around Willow Creek grew heavier by the day. Some neighbors quietly slipped by Marcus's side, offering words of encouragement. Others avoided him altogether, afraid of being pulled into the conflict. But Marcus remained steady, documenting everything and waiting for the investigation to unfold. Privately, though, he wrestled with frustration. His dream home had been attacked, his peace shattered, and yet the process of proving the truth moved slowly. He had always believed in the system, but now he felt the strain of testing its patience. What Karen didn't know, and what Marcus never boasted about, was that his connection to the law ran deeper than anyone in Willow Creek imagined. He wasn't just a homeowner fighting for his property. He was a man who had spent his career inside courtrooms, weighing truth against lies. And though he hadn't revealed that part of himself yet, the day was coming when Karen would find out. For now, Marcus stayed quiet, letting the investigation gather momentum. But deep down, he knew the story of Willow Creek was building toward a showdown that no complaint letter could control. Weeks passed before the official court summons arrived. The neighborhood had grown tense, almost divided. Some residents quietly cheered for Marcus, relieved that someone was finally standing up to Karen. Others muttered about keeping the peace and worried what the investigation might mean for Willow Creek's reputation. Through it all, Marcus remained calm, his focus on the upcoming hearing. On the morning of the court date, Marcus dressed carefully. He chose a sharp, tailored suit, one he had worn countless times before, though never in this context. He wasn't attending as just another homeowner defending himself. Today, his role was far more significant, though no one in Willow Creek had connected the dots yet. Karen, on the other hand, arrived at the courthouse with her usual air of confidence. She swept through the doors in a neatly pressed blazer, heels clicking against the polished floor. To her, this was nothing more than another chance to assert her dominance. She believed she could outtalk, outmaneuver, or simply intimidate her way past any accusation. After all, she had done it before with other neighbors. Inside the courtroom, whispers filled the benches as residents who had been called to testify took their seats. Some avoided Karen's gaze, while others glanced curiously at Marcus, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. Karen sat down at the defendant's table, her arms folded, her expression sharp. She glanced toward Marcus and smirked, as if the outcome was already hers. To her, he was still just a quiet man across the street, the one who planted flowers and painted fences, the one she believed could never match her boldness. Then the bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise!" The room shuffled to its feet, and Karen turned casually toward the front. The door behind the bench opened, and in walked the presiding judge. Her smirk faltered, her posture stiffened, and for the first time since the feud began, Karen's confidence wavered. Because standing at the bench, wearing his robe with measured calm, was Marcus himself. The silence in the courtroom was heavy, broken only by the sound of papers rustling. Neighbors exchanged stunned glances, realizing the man Karen had targeted for months was not only a respected homeowner, but also the very authority she would now answer to. Marcus's expression was steady, professional, revealing none of the turmoil of the past weeks. But as he adjusted his glasses and looked directly at Karen, the message was clear. This was no longer about complaints or sabotage. This was about truth, and the law was finally speaking. The courtroom remained frozen in stunned silence as Marcus took his seat at the bench. For many of the neighbors, it was the first time they realized who he truly was. He wasn't just a polite homeowner quietly tending his garden. He was Judge Marcus Ellison, a respected figure in the county court system. The weight of the revelation seemed to ripple through the room, and all eyes shifted from Marcus to Karen. Karen's face flushed red, her earlier smirk vanishing in an instant. She fidgeted in her chair, trying to regain composure, but the shift in power was undeniable. For years, she had thrived on intimidation, using the HOA board as her personal throne. Yet here she sat, no longer in control, forced to defend herself in the very setting Marcus had mastered his entire career. Marcus's voice, calm and steady, filled the courtroom. This proceeding concerns complaints and allegations of harassment, property damage, and misconduct within the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. The evidence will speak for itself. Karen opened her mouth to protest, but her attorney quickly tugged at her sleeve, urging silence. She sank back into her chair, eyes darting nervously as witnesses were called forward. One by one, neighbors stepped up. A middle-aged woman testified that she saw Karen near Marcus's property late at night, flashlight in hand. Another resident read aloud threatening emails Karen had sent, demanding Marcus repaint his shutters or face serious consequences. A retired couple admitted they had overheard Karen boasting at a block party about getting rid of the new homeowner. Each testimony chipped away at Karen's defense. Marcus listened quietly, never raising his voice, never letting emotion cloud his judgment. He had lived through her sabotage, felt the sting of her hostility, and nearly lost part of his home to the fire. Yet now, as judge, his role was not revenge, it was justice. When the police investigator took the stand, the evidence grew heavier. Photos of the charred shed were shown, alongside the fire marshal's report indicating accelerant had been used. Grainy footage from Marcus's porch camera was presented, showing a figure of Karen's build lurking near his yard days before the fire. Karen's attorney attempted to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, that the accusations stemmed from neighborhood disagreements. But the pile of proof was undeniable. Each piece fit together like a puzzle, and the picture it painted was clear. Through it all, Marcus never let his gaze waver from the case. He treated Karen the same as he would any other defendant, firm, fair, and bound by the law. But beneath his composed exterior was a quiet resolve. She had tried to break his dignity, strip away his peace, and intimidate him into silence. Instead, she had walked directly into the courtroom of the very man she underestimated. As the final witness stepped down, Karen sat pale and speechless, her once commanding presence reduced to a hushed shadow of itself. The truth was laid bare for all to see, and the power she once held in Willow Creek was slipping away, piece by piece. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, every whisper silenced as Marcus carefully reviewed the final notes. Papers lay stacked neatly before him, each one a reminder of the months of torment Karen had inflicted. He glanced up, his calm gaze sweeping over the room. Neighbors sat in rigid silence, waiting for the decision that would not only affect Karen, but reshape the dynamic of Willow Creek itself. Karen, once bold and unshakable, now looked small in her chair. Her shoulders slumped, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She tried to avoid Marcus's eyes, but every so often her gaze flickered toward him, as if searching for some crack in his composure. There was none. Marcus began to speak, his tone steady and deliberate. The evidence presented is clear and consistent. Numerous witnesses have testified, corroborating a pattern of harassment, vandalism, and intimidation directed toward Mr. Ellison. The physical evidence further demonstrates deliberate attempts to damage property and create unsafe conditions. These actions are not in line with the responsibilities of any homeowner, let alone someone claiming to represent a neighborhood association. Karen's attorney attempted a last, feeble objection, but Marcus silenced it with a measured response. This court values fairness, but it will not ignore facts. The time for excuses is past. A hush fell again as Marcus delivered his ruling. Karen Whitmore, you are hereby ordered to pay restitution for damages caused to Mr. Ellison's property, fined for violation of HOA conduct, and formally removed from any position of influence within the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Furthermore, this court will issue a restraining order to ensure no further contact or harassment occurs. The words landed like stones in the still air. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Her face, once flushed with superiority, now paled as reality set in. The authority she had wielded for years was gone in a matter of minutes. The neighbors, long silent under her watch, exchanged glances of relief. For the first time in years, it felt as if the neighborhood had been freed from a grip it never asked for. Marcus tapped his gavel lightly. Court is adjourned. As the room emptied, a few neighbors approached Marcus hesitantly. Some thanked him quietly, others simply nodded with newfound respect. They had seen his strength, not in loud words or confrontation, but in patience, dignity, and the unwavering belief in truth. Karen, escorted out of the courtroom, avoided everyone's eyes. The confident stride she once carried through Willow Creek was gone. Her reign as the self-appointed queen of the HOA had ended not with victory, but with justice. Later that evening, Marcus returned to his home. The charred remains of the shed still lingered as a reminder of what he had endured, but now they felt different. They no longer symbolized loss. They symbolized resilience. He looked around his yard, at the flowers beginning to bloom again, at the porch light glowing softly, and allowed himself a quiet smile. The neighborhood might never be perfect, but Marcus had proven something far greater than curb appeal. He had shown that dignity could withstand spite, and that truth, no matter how long it takes, always rises. And in the quiet of Willow Creek, that truth would echo for years to come.